Blog Talk Radio.
Everybody, it is Saturday morning, and you know what that means. It is time for House Talk pregame with me, Dr. Lauren Pitts, and my amazing co-host for the show. So today, as always, we have the one and only Jared Johnston in the house from Bowie State University, Ronnie Ransome from Virginia State. And as I said last week, my man-child, Andre Garlic, is not able to be with us yet, but he's coming, y'all. I promise. I swear to Goshen, he is coming. Look, this is the deal. House Talk pregame is all about family, and it is our pride. It is our personal business. We are taking ownership of this thing in showing much love to our Hbcu family, student and professional athletes, and their families. And speaking of family, our House Talk pregame family has grown, and we are now a part of the Heritage Sports Radio Network family. We are so excited about that, and you'll be able to check us out on Heritage Sports Radio Network real soon. We'll give you that information as far as days and times as soon as we get it. Jared?
Yeah, good morning, everybody out there tuning in. If you're new to the show, if you were here the first 2 weeks, welcome back. If you're new, welcome. You're definitely in for something great. Those of you guys who are familiar with House Talk, you know how it usually goes. You know Dr. Lauren Pitts is always on top of her game, and Ronnie and I are here to add even more to that, more value. We're going to help you guys with the raw times that we're living in right now, mentally, emotionally, as it deals with athletics and also just people in general with everything that's going on with this pandemic that we're facing. We're here to give you knowledge, real knowledge, and be as transparent every single week and take it up a notch every single week and really show you guys that we care about you. We know you're tired. You know you guys are looking for answers in these times, and that's what we're here for. And we're also here to have fun and just take this hour and a half to kind of get away from what may be going on. Go ahead, Ron. You got it.
All right. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Man, I walked outside this morning, and it felt like a football morning. Nice, chilly breeze outside. Perfect day for football. Perfect day. So, most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, we want to hear from our HBCU fans and family, current and former student athletes. So, during the show, we'll be taking call-in questions and comments by simply dialing direct at 515-605-9744. Or email your HBCU shout-outs, questions, or comments to htpregame@gmail.com. Back to you, Dr. Pitts.
So, look, one of the unique things that we wanted to do with House Talk pregame every week is we really wanted to make sure that our listening audience all over the nation is getting educated and informed about how mental illness is impacting the athletic world. Ronnie and I are both mental health practitioners, and we understand the importance of being of sound mind and mental health wellness when it comes to the performance of the scholar athlete and the professional athlete, and how that wellness impacts their families and everybody that they're in relationships with. So because of that, every week we're going to be offering you a diagnosis of the week. And this week's diagnosis is ADHD. And for those of you that don't know what that acronym stands for, ADHD stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. And the reason why we selected that one for this week is because ADHD is common in athletes and presents with problems focusing, concentrating, learning, attention shifting, and sustaining attention. In fact, ADHD is probably the most common psychiatric condition that sports psychiatrists treat. Males tend to be more hyperactive, and females are more likely to have the inattentive type. So look, so we want to give you some technical definitions so that you know what to be looking for, and so that you can make some determination as to whether or not you need to have a formal screening for ADHD. And because ADHD is so pronounced among scholar athletes and among professional athletes, and particularly among people of color for diagnoses, we're going to spend a couple more minutes than we normally would sort of fleshing this out for you, because if you don't already have a formal diagnosis, or if you think you might, we want to give you some definitive information that can clarify some things for you so that you can get a handle on this and have a better understanding to what might be going on with your own mental health or the mental health of the scholar athlete or the athlete in your life. So the Diagnostic Statistical Manual defines ADHD as the presence of inattention with 6 or more symptoms of inattention for children up to age 16. So that's covering our high school kids, right? And 5 or more for adolescents 17 and older. The symptoms of inattention have been present for at least 6 months, and they are inappropriate for developmental level. So I'm just going to give you a couple of golden nuggets that you can focus on, and then we'll give you some resources on how you can get formally screened to find out if this is a diagnosis that you actually have. So under that inattention category, you also may consider that you or the person you're thinking of often fails to give close attention to details or makes careless mistakes in schoolwork, at work, or with other activities, and often has trouble holding attention on tasks or play activities, often does not seem to listen when spoken to directly, often does not follow through on instructions and fails to finish schoolwork, chores, or duties in the workplace, i.e. loses focus or gets sidetracked really easy, also has trouble organizing tasks and activities. And there are others, but we're going to give you the resources so you can find out what those are. The other criteria for ADHD is hyperactivity and impulsivity. And in a minute, Ronnie's going to give you some additional information on that as well. But in the context of the hyperactivity and the impulsivity, there has to be 6 or more symptoms of hyperactivity and impulsivity for children up to age 16, or 5 or more for adolescents 17 and older and adults. Symptoms of hyperactivity, impulsivity have been present for at least 6 months to an extent that it's disruptive and inappropriate for the person's developmental level. So a couple of golden nuggets under the hyperactivity and the impulsivity. The person often fidgets with or taps hands or feet or squirms in their seat. Often leaves their seat in situations when remaining seated is expected. Often runs about or climbs in situations where it's not appropriate. Adolescents or adults may be limited to feeling restless. Often unable to play or take part in leisure activities quietly. Is often on the go, acting as if driven by a motor. So let me just go ahead and tell y'all, I've never had a formal diagnosis of ADHD, but I'm ADHD like a mug. I am, look, total transparency. Dr. Pitts has adult ADHD for show. In addition, there are some other conditions that must be met. Several inattentive or hyperactive impulsive symptoms were present before age 12 years old, and several symptoms are present in 2 or more settings, at home, school, work, with friends or relatives, or in other activities. And there are others, but at the very end, when Ronnie gets done, we'll give you the resources where you can get a fully comprehensive amount of information that will really help you to determine whether or not you need to be formally screened for ADHD. Ronnie?
Well, Dr. Pitts, just like you, I have not been formally diagnosed with ADHD either. But I can rest assured, having been in the mental health field for the last 5 years and, just learning more about ADHD, I definitely have adult ADHD and have definitely had it my entire life.
Wow.
And with that being said, one of the things I definitely want to talk about this morning regarding ADHD is just how many times ADHD is diagnosed, to children, preteens, adolescents, and things of that nature. Especially in the African American population. Me and Dr. Pitts were having this conversation before we got on air. It's kind of crazy how disproportionately African American kids are diagnosed with ADHD. Mm-hmm. And part of the reason that is, and, something that I truly believe with ADHD is, oftentimes, when you see kids who are very hyperactive or inattentive and things like that, parents or adults tend to forget that, where ADHD impacts the brain in the frontal lobe, which controls your impulse control. It controls your decision making and controls your focus and attention. That part of your brain isn't fully developed until the age of 25. Now, with that being said, being fully developed at the age of 25 would mean that in order for it to be fully developed by then, you probably would have had to been exposed to minimal trauma, drugs, alcohol, things of that nature. So, let's look at, certain populations, especially the African American community, where a lot of our kids who are diagnosed with ADHD come from low-income areas. They come from impoverished homes and things like that. So they're exposed to trauma on a daily basis, whether that's domestic violence, violence in the streets, drug use, incarceration, broken families, things of that nature. All of those things are forms of trauma that, we use the term in the mental health called arrested development. And basically what arrested development is, whenever your body starts to experience that trauma at whatever age, your development on the inside kind of gets arrested in a sense, where it stunts your growth. So, oftentimes I see a lot of kids who are, diagnosed with ADHD because, the parent will come in and say, oh, well, he can't sit still, or he doesn't listen, he's always moving, things like that. And, one of the things I like to point out to parents is, well, one, they're a child, they're a kid, kids move, they move around. For kids, their best way to express how they're feeling and what they're doing is by playing. Play is their language that they know how to understand things. Oftentimes we expect kids at an early age, whether it's, 6, 7, 8, 10, 12 years old, to be able to verbalize what's going on or verbalize how they feel. And that's just not the case. So kids move around, they fidget, they're inattentive, they don't focus all the time. So, I truly believe that, for parents, when you're dealing with a child who has ADHD or, are exhibiting these symptoms, don't rush to conclusion that your child needs to be placed on medication. And one thing I stress to parents one thing I really stress to parents, because I hear this all the time, my child needs to be put on medication so they stop acting crazy or they stop doing this and doing that. Well, the medication doesn't cure ADHD. If anything, the medication, it'll make them focus a little bit more. It'll slow their heart rate down, blood pressure down, and things like that, so they're not as hyper. But that doesn't cure ADHD. And, and I don't know where this stigma of that, put a kid on medication and it cures ADHD, I don't know where that came from or where it started, but that's really unfair, for parents to have that, preconception that that'll do that for their children. So speaking of medications, typically when you have a child who is, diagnosed with ADHD, and like Dr. Pitts was saying, it gets to the point where their hyperactivity or their inattentiveness is becoming detrimental to their growth and development. The big four we normally hear of is Adderall, Ritalin, Clonidine, and guanfacine. And, these medications work by increasing the amount of hormones called dopamine and neuroepinephrine in the brain. These hormones improve concentration and decrease fatigue. So if you're inattentive, it'll help you, it'll increase helping you focus. If you're always hyper or you're tired and things like that, it'll help you with fatigue. And one thing I wanted to point out for our student athletes who are listening, and Dr. Pitts and Jared, I know you know this as well. Typically, a lot of college students, they abuse Adderall and Ritalin like crazy.
Yes, indeed.
Yes.
Down here in Richmond, Virginia, Virginia Commonwealth University, or VCU for short, I work in that area, and I have a lot of clients in the Central Virginia area, typically Richmond. And, one of the things that I always see, it's always at the end of semesters, always at the end of the fall semester and at the end of the spring semester. All the pharmacies surrounding VCU are always out of Adderall, completely out. And, it's crazy because, I have clients who really need, those medications and things like that, but they're out, and they're out for months. So, the parents are left like, well, what am I supposed to do with this child? What, how am I supposed to help them control, these impulses and things like that? So one of the things I want, and real quick, so for student athletes, if you feel like you're suffering from ADHD and you can't control it, or it's hindering you from learning or, impacting your athletic career, I'm going to talk about some coping skills in a second, but one thing I want you to understand, and Jared, you know this as well, typically at least maybe once a season or once or twice a year, the NCAA does random drug testing.
Yep.
They drug test for stimulants, drugs, narcotics, the whole 9 yards. So if you are a student athlete, I need you to pay attention to this. You can absolutely not use your friends or your roommates or a peer from class. You cannot use their Adderall, Ritalin, Clonidine, or Guanfacine without having a standard assessment done by a medical professional. You have to have that done. So now for you student athletes who might still try and, finesse or, try and get by, your athletic trainer cannot give you an ADHD medication. That does not work. So, you have to go get a standard assessment done by a medical professional, whether that's your primary care physician, a psychiatrist, either one of those who can do a standard assessment, run through the battery of tests and things like that and say, yes, okay, you have ADHD. Here's your medication. Here's your medical waiver that you can present to the NCAA that allows you to take those medications. If you do not have that medical exemption or that medical waiver and you be called for a drug screen, you face, some of the consequences, being suspended for X amount of games or even being kicked off the team. If you're a student who has a scholarship, you could lose your sports scholarship especially if it's a situation where you're a repeat offender. So if you're a student athlete and you feel like you're struggling with ADHD, you have to get that medical waiver. So some of the coping skills and things that, I've done in the past to help me with ADHD that I want to discuss with you all. One of the first ones is accepting that you have ADHD. So if you've been diagnosed with ADHD, or even if you haven't been diagnosed with ADHD like me and Dr. Pitts, and we both know that we have it, it's not a death sentence, okay? All ADHD is just a certain way your brain is wired. Your brain is wired a little bit differently for where you're either more impulsive, you're a little bit more inattentive than normal, or you could be both. So one of the things that you need to understand is you need to accept that you have it and learn how it affects you. Just because ADHD affects me one way does not mean it affects Dr. Pitts the same exact way. For me, I'm a little bit more impulsive and, things like that. Dr. Pitts could be more inattentive or both. So one of the first things is learning how ADHD affects you. Are you more impulsive? Are you more inattentive? Or are you both? Another thing you can do is practicing mindfulness or, being present in that moment. Typically, if you suffer from inattentiveness and things like that, your mind will wander. You'll have other things on your mind. You'll be thinking about 1,000,001 other things outside of what you're supposed to be doing. So practicing mindfulness or even meditation, honing your brain in and centering yourself to focus on what's present at that time and only focusing on that. It takes practice, especially, if you have an inattentive brain, it's going to take some practicing, clearing out those thoughts in your head and focusing on one thing. Another thing, and this is something that I really struggle with, is, challenging negative thoughts and taking action against them. And I give you a perfect example. And Jared, you can tell me, and Dr. Fish, you can tell me if you've had this happen before too. Let's say you got a paper due for class and, 5-10 page paper. You ain't started on it yet. It's due in about 2 weeks or a week. For me, I'm a procrastination expert. So, the day, either the day before or the day of, let me get started on the paper.
You going to bang it out?
So, so let's say you get started on the paper, you maybe get a paragraph in, and then next thing you know, you're on your phone scrolling through Instagram for the next hour. Part of practicing mindfulness and things like that is also understanding when your brain is, trying to get you steered off of what you're doing. And some things that you can ask yourself if you do this is, what was going on before you started that task? So how were you feeling before you started that task? Did you feel rushed? Did you feel like you really weren't interested in the topic or what you had to do? Or did you feel like, that maybe you writing this paper or doing this assignment wasn't doable? So automatically your brain is putting these thoughts in your head like, well, I know I'm not going to get a good grade on this anyways. I'm just going to write some BS and turn it in. Or, I really don't care about this class, so whatever grade I get is fine. It's whatever. So let me just keep on scrolling or find other things to do.
Right.
For me, what I used to do is if I had a paper or any task that I got to do, whether it's, documentation for work and things like that, my mind will wander in a heartbeat. I can be started on it, be diligent, and then 2 seconds later, I'm on my phone. I want to go outside for a second. Oh, maybe I left something in the car. Let me go check real quick. So one thing I like to do, and I do this for myself and when I work with clients, is establishing breaks in between doing an assignment. So as opposed to sitting there for 2 hours or 3 hours or however long it's going to take you to do that assignment, I like to set timers. So for me, I'll get started on something, and I've worked my way up to where I can probably focus for about a good 30 minutes, and then I need maybe a 5 or 10 minute break to, get up, move around, go check on something real quick. Come when that 5 or 10 minutes is up, come back, work on it for another 30 minutes until I finish what I have to do. Now, if you have a time crunch, or if you're like me where you like to procrastinate a lot, this is going to take some practice. Mm-hmm. Or if you really struggle with inattentiveness, for my clients, oftentimes my clients who have ADHD, telling them let's focus on something for 30 minutes and take a 5-minute break, that does not work at all. So what I do is I back it all the way down. Well, let's work on this for 5 minutes and then take a 5-minute break and build
Ronnie,
up.
hold on for a second. Ronnie, I'm sorry. Hold on for 2 seconds because I just had a thought and I want Jared to jump in. So, Jared, as a quarterback, with your responsibility, is particularly in the middle of a game, having to see all things at all times and literally have eyes in the front, side, and back of your head. And I don't know if you have ADHD or not, but from a quarterback perspective, what would that look like, or what do you think that would feel if you have ADHD, or for maybe the quarterback that does? It seems to me like that would be beneficial. Am I crazy for thinking that?
Yeah, I don't think you're crazy for thinking that. And for the ADHD thing, when it comes to the paper, I'm going to touch on that real quick, and then I'm going to go to the quarterback thing. But, I mean, I had a 33-page paper for one whole semester. That's the only thing we had to do. I didn't do it until the last week of the semester. And I, would start on it, then I would stop, and it was just, no motivation, and it was just a belief that, part of you feels like you can't do it because you don't have enough information to write about it and things like that. So I think everybody does have bouts of that and goes in and out of it. But as far as quarterback, for me, in a game, it was very hard for me to stray away from the actual game and what's going on in the middle of the game. But, as far as before the game, you warming up, you have fans, I mean, your attention can easily get swayed to looking at, who's in the stands, looking at cheerleaders, to talking to the other team and getting into, verbal altercations with them. But during the game, I never had any time where I was really distracted because, the sport, you have to have this ultimate focus, and especially quarterback, you have to be a little more focused because you have to know what everyone else is doing. And you may have some guys, and I've had teammates who maybe they, had some ADHD, and in a game they would wander off, and you'd be wondering, where's your head at right now? So I didn't have any experience myself, but I would definitely say teammates do, and that's even more reason as a quarterback or like another position as a linebacker, being the leader of the defense, you really have to dial in and focus. And if a quarterback or, somebody like a linebacker does have ADHD, I think that it's very important for them to get help as well because, again, you're at a position of leadership on a field, which is a dangerous sport. So that's my take on it.
Okay. Ronnie, go ahead and...
Did that answer your question?
It did.
Okay,
it did.
Cool.
I think you told me that I was crazy, but...
Nah, maybe a little bit.
Just a little
you
bit.
can say crazy ADHD. That's it.
Okay. Ronnie, okay, go ahead and finish what you were saying, hon. Give them some tools or some quick resources, and then I have one last resource that I'm going to add so that we can go ahead and get into our shout outs and keep this train moving.
Got you. So, and that was a very good answer, Joe. And real quick, I wanted to answer that question as well. I think part of that, like Jared was saying, is, being being focused on the game in the matter at hand, is also your interest and your love for the game too. And typically, a lot of people who suffer from ADHD, they find it hard for things to interest them or keep their attention for a long period of time. So, student athletes who love the game and love, the small parts and details of the game, I think that also kind of helps with coping with ADHD as well, that hyper focus or what we call tunnel vision. Okay. So real quick, without going too much on a tangent, some other things that you can work with, like I said, taking breaks, so not doing everything at one time, establishing breaks and things like that. Progressive muscle relaxation. So for those who are very impulsive or hyperactive and things like that, like I said a couple weeks ago, progressive muscle relaxation, where you're tensing up your muscles and relaxing, like doing deep breathing techniques as well. Getting plenty of sleep. When you're sleep deprived or you're not getting enough sleep, that can definitely hinder your inattentiveness, your focus, and your decision making skills. Setting alarms and timers so you stay on task. So if you're going to get off task easily or your mind's going to wander, setting alarms so you can be focused for short bursts of time. And even, fidget toys. I know a couple years ago, fidget toys and fidget spinners became, highly popular, especially in the mental health field and things like that. There's absolutely nothing wrong with having something in your hand. Like for me, when I was in class, I could use a pen or a pencil and, just be twiddling that in my fingers or, tapping my feet or something like that. As long as I was moving in some way, shape, or form, I could focus a little bit better. And I also wanted to bring to light to some people who might not know this, but these two Olympic athletes who are probably one of the two greatest American Olympic athletes in history, Simone Biles. She did an article a couple of years ago talking about her ADHD and how, she's been diagnosed with ADHD at a very, very early age and how she's on medication and how, being on medication has not hindered her we clearly see has not hindered her from being a great Olympic athlete and a great person, as well. And Michael Phelps. Michael Phelps is somebody who was also diagnosed with ADHD at a very early age. And he talks about how his parents put him into swimming to burn off a lot of that energy and that hyperactivity. And we see what that did for him. He went on to be probably the most decorated Olympic athlete in history. So,
for sure.
Just because, like I said, just because you have ADHD does not mean that it's a death sentence or it's the end of the world for you. There are a million ways to cope with it and deal with it. So, Dr. Pay, I know you said you wanted to reel off some resources and things like that, so go ahead.
Yeah, so actually I'm just going to give one major one because the ADD Resource Center, their whole approach to ADHD and ADD is to address the disorder with proven practical programs and services for people dealing with the challenges of ADHD and related issues. So that website is addrc.org. And what I would encourage our listening audience to do is when you go through the Resource Center, there are a number of tabs, but particularly under the Services tab, the Adults tab, the Education and the Life Skills tab, as well as the Screening tab. There's a ton of information on there that ADHD is such a problem at the collegiate level that they have entire sections on college issues. So I would certainly encourage, particularly the scholar athletes at the collegiate level, to check that out. If you believe that you may have ADHD, there are self-screening tools available through the Resource Center. Let me just put this disclaimer out there. We are not suggesting for a moment that you just do a self-screening and then diagnose yourself with ADHD and that's it. If you do a self-screening and you determine based on that screening that you may likely have ADHD, we strongly encourage you to see your primary doctor or a mental health professional so that a formal screening can be done for ADHD. Because if, in fact, you do have a formal diagnosis, dependent upon how severe the case of ADHD is, you may be able to benefit from medication intervention. So, again, the ADD Resource Center's website is addrc.org. And let me tell you, folks, we know, I said in the very beginning that we were going to spend a few more minutes on this topic because it is such a major issue among scholar athletes. So I know, we belabored the point, but it's important. Our mental wellness is paramount, and we know that these conversations are important. We know that you care about them. There isn't anybody that is listening, and I guarantee it. I stand by what I'm about to say. There isn't anybody who's listening today that doesn't know at least one person in their life, personally or professionally, that either officially has been diagnosed with ADHD or could officially be diagnosed with ADHD, regardless of what the stimulus may be that caused the disorder to be present in that person's life or not. So, look, we want you to contribute to these conversations. You can call us live during the show at 515-605-9744. Again, that's 515-605-9744. You can also email us at htpregame@gmail.com. And we also encourage you to download the Heritage Sports Radio Network app on your phone so that you can listen anywhere by visiting. You can listen anywhere, and you can do that by visiting the App Store or Google Play. Just search Heritage Sports Radio and then hit the download button. You can also help us keep these conversations growing by your sponsorship with a gift in whatever amount you can afford by visiting drlaurendpitts.com and clicking on the donate button, or you can email us at htpregame@gmail.com to receive a sponsorship packet. Jared, let's get started with those HBCU shout-outs.
Yes. Yeah, that was definitely great. Again, I feel like I'm going to have my master's by the end of the season in psychology because y'all always dropping a lot of gems right off the bat. I appreciate it. But like Dr. Pitts said, we going to get into the HBCU shout-outs like we do every week because we love our HBCUs, of course, and got to show them love. I'm going to name off two. One I know a lot of people probably haven't heard about is Selma University. I've never heard about it until recently. Selma University was founded in 1878 in Selma, Alabama. It was first founded as Alabama Baptist Normal and Theological School, and the purpose of it was to train African Americans to become ministers. In 1908, the name was officially changed to Selma University, and the first president to not be a minister of the school in all of its years is Eddie Hill, who became the president in 2020. And then the second school, Shaw University. I played against Shaw University. They were in the CIAA Division II football as well, so I know a little bit about them. They're in Raleigh, North Carolina, and they were founded December 1st, 1865, same year as Bowie State. And they're the second HBCU that was in the southern United States. And it's actually called the Mother of African American College because the founding presidents of North Carolina Central, Elizabeth City State University, and Fayetteville State University are all Shaw alumni. So that's definitely big and showing that a lot of, HBCU alumni do go on to do great things. That's my two.
Nice. Ronnie?
All right, so I'm going to shout out two as well. So the first one I want to shout out is Shorter College. They are located in North Little Rock, Arkansas. They were founded in 1886 by the African Methodist Episcopal Church. They are the only two-year private HBCU in the country, and one of their notable alumni is Daisy Bates, who was a huge contributor and mentor to the Little Rock Nine. I'm pretty sure some of our listeners are familiar with the Little Rock Nine and the historical contributions they have made. And the second college I want to shout out is Dillard University. They are located in New Orleans, Louisiana. They were founded in 1869. They are the only university in the United States that is a partner of the Melton Foundation, and I lost my notes about what the Mountain Foundation was, so I'm going to have to find those, and I will express that more in the next show. But one of their notable alumni is Lisa Fraser Page, who is co-author of the book The Pact, 3 Young Men Make a Promise and Fulfill a Dream. I actually had a chance to read that book when I was in high school. I highly recommend that book to our young listeners and things like that. It's a very informative and very powerful book. So those are my 2 schools. Dr. Pitts?
Nice. And I said that I was going to redeem myself this week because I hadn't done my homework. So
right.
I'm going to re-shout out. I'm going to re-shout out those that I didn't give any information on real quick. So Fayetteville State University was founded in 1867 in Fayetteville, North Carolina. Notable alum are Michelle S. Jones, who was the first woman in the United States Army Reserve to reach the position of Command Sergeant Major of the U.S. Army Reserve, Marvin W. Lucas, member of the North Carolina General Assembly, and Darrell Armstrong, who's a former professional basketball player, current assistant coach with the NBA's Dallas Mavericks. Fayetteville State is elected the #1 best HBCU sociology school by HBCUcolleges.com. I also want to shout out Alcorn State University, founded in 1871 in Lorman, Mississippi. Notable alum, Medgar Evers, civil rights activist who the Ghost of Mississippi movie was made after. Steve McNair, former NFL quarterback, and Alex Haley, the author of Roots. Alcorn is the oldest public historically black land-grant institution in the United States and the second oldest state-supported institution of higher learning in Mississippi. And then I'm going to shout out Prairie View A&M University, founded in 1876 in Prairie View, Texas. Notable alum, Sandra Bland, activist. We all know the story behind what happened to Ms. Bland and as it relates to injustice and inequality and police brutality in this country. Lonnie Love, she is a comedian, actress, and original cast member of The Real. And Quentin Spears, NFL linebacker. Those are my shout-outs. Jared?
I didn't know Darrell Armstrong went to HBCU.
Yeah.
That's major. Yeah. But, yeah, so on this episode is definitely going to be a good one. The title of it is Last Chance Youth. And in the book that I wrote, From Cleats to Loafers and Everything in Between, which sheds light on the transition phase for athletes as they transition post-athletics and gives ideologies on how we can transition without having setbacks, but instead, continue to move forward and better ourselves off the field. It's available on Amazon for printback, ebook, and also the audio book is coming out soon. Been delayed because of COVID, but one of the chapters in the book is Last Chance You, and that's the title of the show, like I mentioned. And we're going to discuss navigating the junior college route, which a lot of people may have, children or nephews, nieces that played in junior college, or maybe you personally played in junior college. And so we're going to discuss that. We're also going to talk about going D1. If you don't go D1, what's the next option? Is it over for you? Is it not? How does that affect you mentally as you do not go D1? So we're going to discuss that. And we're just going to wrap it all up and discuss is really the last chance for our student athletes. And we talk about last chance in the sporting world, but also for a lot of our young athletes, they feel this is the last chance at life for them. And I can personally say, being at a junior college, I've seen both sides of it where, it's sad, but some guys, if they do not go on to play at a university, their life is more than likely going to, down spiral based off of some of the actions that you see on a daily basis. So we'll get right into,
Jared?
As far as the behavior, you can tell kids so when you go to junior college, for those of you guys who aren't familiar, if there's young people that are going to listen to this show and maybe you're in high school and you haven't heard about a junior college is a stepping stone for a lot of athletes to go to Division I. Now, you can go to Division II, you can go to Division III in a IA, but the main reason people go to a junior college is because their grades weren't as good in high school to qualify for Division I, or they didn't have enough film to get looks from Division I. Now, that doesn't mean you have the talent to go Division I, but that's just the perception that everyone has. They get another chance, another 2 years of film to go D1. So when you get on the campus, with that being said, you can imagine there's a lot of kids that come to a junior college with issues, whether it be behavioral issues, which is what I see most of the time, and that can stem from a lack of structure at home. And I think that's one of the main things that I saw at a junior college. And, you know, as our first bullet point for this is mental health services that are desperately needed. When I was in junior college, I went to two separate. And neither one of them had anyone there that was specifically there for the student athlete to help them mentally, to help them, you know, psychology, you know, as far as the psychology goes and their mental health. Everything there was geared towards becoming a better player, getting your film, and so you can leave. Nobody was there to stay. It was just a stepping stone in your career, but it only helped you athletically. And I think that's one of the things that is definitely missing on the junior college level, because you have kids that are going away for the first time. They have issues that they're dealing with. They may have children back at home. And like I said, they come from a lot of them may come from a structure that's not as solid. The academics, you know, they don't have, as we're talking about ADHD, a lot of them, it seems like they may have ADHD and there's no one there to help them combat that issue. And that's when you see a lot of guys come and a week later they're kicked out, or 2 weeks later they're gone, or they flunk out. And they go back home and you just wonder, like, you know, what do they do from there? Where do they go? Is that really, you know, their last chance? And I know a lot of you guys may have heard of Last Chance U, the Netflix series that has gotten a lot of buzz over the last, I'd say, 4 years or so, 4 or 5 years. But if you haven't watched it, I encourage you to watch it. It gives you a raw, in-depth look into what goes on behind closed doors. And it really is an eye-opener, because you have a lot of guys who leave the junior college and you see guys get arrested. They go to jail. And they just never get their life, you know, on the right foot. And there's definitely services, you know, like you and Ronnie. If you guys were on that level to help these kids, it will make so much of a difference in their lives. I believe that.
I want to, you know, I agree with you, Jared, and my add-on to that, or my piggyback on that, is supports my argument, if you will, for the importance of couple marriage and family therapists, in the schools. You know, there are a lot of districts across the country that have school-based youth services and services of that magnitude. You know, they have behavior interventionists and mental health counselors. But here's why I advocate so strongly for couple marriage and family therapists. We look at not just the student athlete, but we look at the family system. Everything that a couple marriage and family therapist does is through a systemic lens. It's not taking anything from any other mental health practitioner, but it speaks to what you said about the structure of home, for example, not being, you know, stable. It speaks to all of these other contextual variables that may be going on in the life of the student athlete that can be impacting how they're functioning in the classroom, on the field, on the court, or just in how they're making sense of the world around them. And, oh, by the way, it can also contribute to a deterioration of their mental health, which, as we all know, will have an adverse effect on their ability to play the sport that they love and care about so much. Your thoughts, Ronnie?
Right.
I agree with both points from both of you guys. I didn't go the junior college route, so I don't want to, you know, make assumptions of what it was like at a junior college or things like that. However, I have teammates who come from junior colleges and things like that. And, you know, and I'm pretty sure, a lot of student athletes, especially football players, have watched the show on Netflix called Last Chance U and things like that. And just from watching the show, and I didn't watch this past season or anything like that, but I definitely watched the first couple seasons. And one of the things I noticed, and Dr. Pitts, you definitely kind of touched on it, a lot of the times, most of those student athletes who, were on that show, were on those teams that they showed and whatnot, a lot of them come from broken homes or, they come from impoverished families and things like that. And, throughout the show and things like that, especially the first 2 seasons when they were down in Mississippi, I think it was at East Mississippi College. I can't remember the lady's name, but she was like the academic advisor, but she also was kind of like, the therapist, the counselor, the whole 9 yards. And, like Jared was saying, when you go to junior college route, you're only there for a year, 2 years, 2 years max. After 2 years, you're gone anyways. So, those coaches are in the business of, well, look, we're going to do what we got to do to get you ready to go to D1 or D2, whatever school it is that you're going to go to. They're not really caring about, the family history, your social life, things like that. All they care about is football. And one of the things that just being a student athlete and things like that and having teammates who come from those type of environments is, a lot of those coaches are very, I guess you can quote unquote say verbal abusers, yelling, almost to the
triggering and stressing
demeaning.
like a mug.
Exactly. And and one of the biggest traumas that we kind of overlook in childhood development is yelling and screaming. When you're in a house or an environment where there's nothing but yelling and screaming and you're growing up as a baby, you don't I mean, you can hear the sounds and things like that, but you don't understand what it is. You just hear the loud noise, the yelling and screaming. That scares them. They're automatically fearful. So they go into that fight or flight mode at a very early age. And if that's repeated over and over and over again, like I was saying earlier, that stunts your growth. That's a form of arrested development. So you don't feel safe and secure in your own environment. So, and you see these coaches who, just berate these kids. Calling, especially the third season when they left from Mississippi and went to the other school. I can't remember. I think it was in
Coach Brown.
Yeah.
Coach Brown.
Talking about, now, Jared, we all have coaches who are just, they'll call you everything but a blessed child of God. And,
exactly.
Some kids take that. Some kids can take that, turn it into motivation. All right, coach, I got you. Other kids, if you come from an environment where that yelling and that demeaning is something that you're used to, that affects your self-esteem, that affects your confidence. So, in turn, that player is going to shut down. You've automatically lost that kid. So, I definitely agree that, there should be some form of mental health support, not only at junior colleges, but at all colleges. And, a lot of colleges are starting to do that. But in the junior college route, when you have these supremely talented kids who are just looking for a way out of their environment, looking for an escape, and they have to go through this extra hurdle of going to a school that they didn't even know about in the middle of nowhere, they need some type of support because oftentimes they're there by themselves. So
I got a question for you, too. Not to cut you off, Ronnie, but to your point, though, my interpretation of what you all are saying is, yes, the support is definitely needed. So, how I am. the empowerment coach and inspirational speaker in me, in relationship to my clinical expertise, then makes me question, is it a stretch to suggest that because of the pressure that scholar athletes experience, regardless of what sport they're playing, is it a stretch that we should consider mandating mental health support for the athletes?
No,
I don't think
that's not a stretch at all. Not at all. No stretch. Not even close. Go ahead, Jared.
So, my second junior college I went to, ASA, it was fairly new, but there was a lot of bounce backs that would come to that junior college. And for you guys that are unfamiliar with a bounce back, it's somebody who was already out of university. It could be a Division I, Division II. Typically, it's Division I. They're at a big school and they come to a junior college, meaning they took a step below and they bounced back. So I got to see several guys who are at, like, University of South Florida, Central Florida, like guys that start and play. And once I hang around them, good guys, you know, at the end of the day, good guys. But you can tell that there's behavior issues that were not addressed while they were at the university. So it also goes to show the universities need to do a better job at controlling and supporting the student athletes while they're at the university so they don't end up at a junior college, because both of the guys from those schools I just mentioned, neither one of them finished the season. They got kicked out of school. You know what I'm saying? And it goes to show, is it really necessary and smart to send a kid from a Division I school who has behavior issues and then send him to another school who is filled with the majority of the team having behavior issues, and you expect them to succeed and make it back to a Division I level, instead of sending them to some type of programming where they can actually focus mentally and emotionally and maybe not even play football for a semester, and then bring them back to a Division I school, because there was never any outlet, like I said, to develop off of the field. They would come to a junior college and they would get better in football, but they wouldn't get better as a person. And then some of them, I mean, I had a teammate, he would come in every morning at 6 o'clock in the morning. We got to get on a bus at 7 to go to practice. You know what I'm saying? And there was nobody who ever corrected him. And it led to him getting kicked off the team, not going back to school, not finishing school. So I think in some situations, it starts at those universities for those bounce backs. They have to take ownership as well and not just throw them to the wolves because they see that they have deviant behavior. They should try to correct it, in my opinion.
I like it. So then,
go ahead,
Ronnie. Go ahead.
And yeah, just real quick, I don't think that's a stretch at all, Dr. Pitts. I think, especially, whether it's junior college, D1, D2, D3, whatever the case may be, these schools ask so much of the student athletes. They ask them to be, performers on the field or court or whatever the case may be, and also be, to maintain a certain GPA and integrity in the classroom as well. And oftentimes, that investment we make as student athletes into the school, there's really no return, especially if you don't go to the professional level of your sport. You just, of course you get a degree and things like that. And, the cliche argument, especially if you're, a student athlete who is on scholarship, well, we gave you a scholarship, we paid for your school and all that type of stuff. What more do you want? That cliche is played out. So, I firmly believe, there should be some form of a clinician or a mental health support system. And I think most schools have, the college counselors and things like that. But as student athletes, especially me, I wasn't about to go over there and, talk to these quote unquote college counselors and things like that who might not have no idea of what it's like to be a student athlete or the things we go through on a daily basis. Most of those counselors, they serve a great purpose on college campuses, don't get me wrong. But, I firmly believe that student athletes need somebody who understands the mindset and, the expectations of a student athlete, for every college program.
Right.
Wow.
So,
go ahead, Jared.
Dr. Fitz?
No, I'm amazed. Go ahead.
Yeah, so with that being said, and, we talked about junior college being a stepping stone to D1, and, you start to sense a lot of pressure, fear, doubtfulness once you come upon, those last couple of months before you are to transition to a university. And you can see it in people's faces. If it's not Division I, it's like they failed themselves, even though they're getting a scholarship to, even if it's a Division I AA, sometimes guys look down on that, or Division II, they start to feel that they didn't accomplish what they, intended to at that junior college. And I think that's a big topic as well, with putting so much focus on a lot of our high school kids going to the Division I level. And a lot of guys feel like if I don't go D1, I'm not going to college. And in a sense, they feel like that's their last chance as well. What do you guys think about the whole division aspect of it? And I think we could talk about what's the benefits, of going to a Division II. Ronnie and I both attended a Division II. And before I went, I didn't want to go. But now looking back on it, I had a great experience. So if you guys want to hit on that as it relates to you guys.
Can I chime in on that first?
Yeah. Sure.
So So I have a parental perspective in that my stepson was definitely, he went D1. He was slated to go D1. You know, he was doing the darn thing. By the beginning of his junior year in high school, he had 31 offers out there from D1 schools. He was a beast. He was a linebacker that, just extraordinary athlete. And, you know, fate had its way, and he was in a near fatal car accident and broke his neck and his back. Right. And he was in a near fatal car accident, broke his neck and his back. But here's how good God is, folks. He was able, at the time, his mother's brother-in-law was playing for the New York Giants, and the family decision was made to fly him to Lenox Hospital in Manhattan. And for those of you who don't know, they, are world renowned for their work with sports medicine and what have you. And they medevaced him to Lenox. They operated on him. He was actually able to play with a halo, and he still went D1. He went to the University of Oklahoma. After the accident, though, his father, who was an extraordinary scholar athlete at Dell State, had said to him, you really should consider going D2. And to your point, Jared, he didn't want to do that. He did not want to do that because the mindset was D1 is my greatest access, if you will, to going to the NFL. And nobody was disputing his talent. But considering the injuries that he had sustained, his father and I at the time were concerned that there was going to be sort of like apprehension because of the injury that he had sustained. And he did get playing time at OU. And, hindsight is 20/20, and we may never actually know, but the belief was that he would have gotten significantly more playing time, or could have gotten significantly more playing time had he gone D2 in light of the injury. Right. Now, I will say, for folk that have this, D1 is the road to the NFL, nobody's disputing that it does increase your chances. But I will tell you that when his father was at Dell State, there were 5 of his teammates that went pro back then. Went pro and had outstanding careers in the NFL. So I say all that to say, as a parent, I want to encourage scholar athletes, and I want to encourage parents listening, don't discount or sleep on D2 because everybody's pressed to go D1, so you're just one in the crowd, right? But if you go D2, it gives you an opportunity to be the outlier. It gives you the opportunity to shine brighter than you would necessarily at a D1 because you're with, let's face it, some of the D2 students are just playing because they love the game. They're not worried about going pro. And D2 students do go pro. So don't sleep on the opportunities that D2 can provide for you to go pro. Make a well-informed decision. And if you opt to go D2, go to D2 and shine like you've never shined before so that you can get those looks. Go ahead, gentlemen.
Agreed.
Yeah, definitely. Ronnie, you was about to say something, I think. Go ahead.
Yeah, to piggyback off what Dr. Pitts was saying about, going D2, I wanted to, I just looked up on the NCAA website, current D2 and D3 players who made active NFL rosters. So, and I'm going to say some of these names, and I'm pretty sure a lot of our listeners are very familiar with them. First and foremost, Tyreek Hill, wide receiver for the Kansas City Chiefs. He attended West Alabama. Adam Thielen, another receiver for Minnesota Vikings. He attended Minnesota State. You have, and real quick, I'm sorry, guys, I got to do this shout out. Hometown, Virginia State's own Trenton Cannon, running back for the Carolina Panthers. This is third year in the league. He's making everybody here in Ettrick, Virginia, very proud. Shout out to my boy Trent. Keep doing your thing, and keep proving everybody wrong.
Yes.
And then a couple D3 players who are in the NFL that they might not be notarized or name worthy, but they've made it. For the Arizona Cardinals, you have Dan Arnold, who attended Wisconsin Platteville. For the Jacksonville Jaguars, you have Ben Bartsch, who attended St. John's in Minnesota. So to piggyback off what Dr. Pitts and Jared was saying, I definitely share a little bit of my testimony in a little bit, but just because you don't go D1, does not mean you can't make it to the league. And one of the things, for Tyreek Hill and Adam Thielen and things like that, for Tyreek Hill's case, and you cannot coach speed. You can't teach speed. You can't coach it. You either have it or you don't. So for somebody like Tyreek Hill, who is, and we all know he's blazing fast. He stood out. Adam Thielen is a possession receiver, and he can, break tackles and things like that. Very quick, he's a good technician, running routes and things like that. So he shined with that. My boy Trent, very, very fast. He stood out when he came to Virginia State. He actually attended Shepherd University first before he came to Virginia State. And, thank God for Shepherd not allowing him to start there. So we came to Virginia State, and he absolutely showed.
I wish he stayed. I wish he stayed at Shepherd. I haven't seen him, doing Bowie a little dirty more than one time.
But you up,
so
Jared?
he could have stayed there. Yeah. Nah, he's a great player though.
No love.
He should have stayed up in West Virginia. And Shepherd is another great Division II program as well for those out there.
Very great. I was actually recruited by Shepherd, and the only reason I didn't it came down for me between Shepherd and Virginia State, and the only difference was that Virginia State offered me a full ride, and Shepherd was like, well, we'll give you a half a scholarship. You come here for a year, prove yourself, we'll give you a full ride. And, for me, like I said, in one of our earlier shows, I was thinking full ride. I didn't want my parents to pay for college. I needed a full ride.
Not mad
so that was made my decision at Virginia State a lot easier. Go ahead, back to you, Jared.
So while we're on the topic of the D2, D1, I think it's also important, before you get on a Division II level, I think the perception is, and I think like Dr. Pitts said, D1 does give you easier access to the NFL. We all know that. But I heard echo. So like I was saying, Division II, there's also great competition, and a lot of people undermine that. Because when I got to Bowie, I was kind of surprised. It was guys that had the same talent level of some guys I know that were on the Division I level. And I think that that's something that should be given a little more focus. And a lot of guys go to the Division II level thinking that they're so much better than what they are, and then they end up not even playing. And it's because they go in there with a lack of focus. So I just want to say that's something that shouldn't be that needs to be taken into consideration. Also, the coaching style, the way the program is run. Just because it's Division II school or Division III doesn't mean that the coaches are going to run the program like Pop Warner. You're still going to have strict rules. You're still going to have to wake up at a certain time. You're going to have to be on time. You're going to have to, be disciplined, just like you're on a Division I level. You're just not getting the public notoriety. You're just not on TV every single weekend and things like that. But I would say it's definitely worth a shot, especially if they're giving you a scholarship. At the end of the day, your goal, you want to go to the NFL, but they're giving you an opportunity to get in. Yeah, and if some people nowadays, they're like, school this, school that. But at the end of the day, you have something that they can't take from you. And depending on what field you're in, you will need a degree. So that's great in itself, because you may go to a bigger school and you may not be able to focus at that Division I school because there's so much more going on. So I think that's like an advantage that I found. It's a close-knit community, and you have a little more help, in my opinion, from being at a Division II.
So what happens? What happens when, because let's face it, particularly, and I'm giving my parent perspective here, sometimes you can't tell folks stuff. They don't believe poop stinks till they smell it. And they just not, real talk, right? You're just not listening. D1, 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 D1. So then what? Mm-hmm. What happens is the D1 dream is shattered? What do they do?
It hurts Ronnie. It hurts Ronnie.
Well,
talk about that?
They end up in me and Ronnie's office.
They might.
Yeah,
they
and
might.
I almost ended up in one of them offices myself. Just real quick about my own personal experiences with that. Like I told you all a couple weeks ago, University of Maryland was my dream school. That was the school I wanted to attend. I wanted to be a Terrapin really bad. And up until like I told the story, up until my senior year, there was no indication to tell me otherwise. I wasn't going there. I was performing on the field. I would go to the camp every year when they would invite their top recruits and things like that, and I would bust these top recruits up. These dudes were 6'5", 6'6", 6'7". I did not care. They were getting pancaked. I was making sacks. I was getting bound. I was showing out. And the thing that crushed me was when their O-line coach, I think his name was Coach Bratton. I think that's his name. He sat there and said, if you were only 6'3", instead of a verbal, we would give you an official offer.
Wow.
And I could not comprehend. I could comprehend it. I just didn't want to. I didn't want to believe that something that I had no control over. And like I said, for me being 6'1", I'm above average height for a male. So to be told I'm height challenged now when I was in high school, I played guard and tackle. When I got to college, when I got to Virginia State, I moved over to center reluctantly, but I ended up loving it. But yeah, I was devastated. I couldn't believe it. I had these, and when he said that, it started making a lot of sense. I had coaches. I remember the O-line coach from University of Ohio came. He flew in to see me, and I guess on my highlight tape, I looked a little bit taller, and I might have stretched the truth a little bit about my height on my highlight tape. I might have said I was like 6'2", 6'3". I might have stretched the truth just a little bit.
Just a little bit.
And when he, so when he met me in person, he's about 6'4", 6'5", and he's looking at me like, oh, okay, I just wanted to put a face to the name and things like that, and that was it. I had other D1 coaches come by and see me, and when they saw me in person, they're like, God, you look so much bigger on tape. And I'm like, well, I'm 280, I'm not small. But to them, I was small to them. So, that was a hard truth that I had to come to accept. And probably one of my biggest regrets about the recruiting process was I didn't even fathom giving D2 schools a chance.
Wow.
I had, Virginia has a lot of D3 schools in the state, and the only two D2 schools in the state are Virginia State and Virginia Union. Oh, sorry, there's three. It's University of Lynchburg. But, I didn't care about them schools. Like I said, Virginia State was at the bottom. The very bottom of my list of schools to even contemplate. That was probably one of my biggest regrets was not putting, sending film and, reaching out to these D2 schools and was just focused on D1 and D1 AA, And I had a teammate who also played offensive line with me in high school. And, he was 6'2", and he's, a little bit more thicker than I was, but preferred walked on at UVA. And I could have taken that route. I could have preferred walked on there or any other D1 school and, really tried to battle it out and things like that. But I wanted to play. Like I said, I wasn't a bench rider, and I definitely wasn't about to start. So, once I, kind of got out of my feelings and realizing that this D1 dream has just been eviscerated, is no longer, I came to terms with like, well, if I'm going to go to D2, well, I'm going to show out at the D2 school. They're going to see me one way or another. And, I definitely got some personal accolades along the way when I was at Virginia State. Definitely did my thing on the field and things like that. Injuries kind of stunted, me having a chance at the league or any other league for that situation. But, my biggest regret would be not giving D2 schools a chance to recruit me.
Wow.
Yeah, I agree with that. Mine was the same. I actually had Virginia State. They came to my school. I don't know if you remember Coach Hargrove. He was there when we got there.
Coach Hart.
He came to school a couple of times, and I listened to him, but I would throw the stuff out like I'm not going to Virginia State. Meanwhile, I didn't have any Division I offer at the same time, so it's like you close out other opportunities that you never know what God may have in store for you, you know, at that university, or the people you may meet and the connections and things like that. I think, you know, I have great connections from Bowie, and if I shunned Bowie because of Division II, you know, a lot of great things that have happened since I graduated would not have happened. But of course, you don't know that in high school, but you just have to have an open mind. And as I am on the coaching staff for a high school now, with Garfield High School in Woodbridge, Virginia, you know, you see it. It's guys that you can see in their face they're kind of disappointed because they don't have the Division I offer, or they get an offer to a Division III school, and they're not as excited. And another thing that I think affects that mentality and that emotional feeling they have is because everyone gives all the attention to the kid that does go to the big school. You know what I mean? And I think that plays on our young student athletes in a wrong way. And I think that's even more reason that they need mental support, you know, at the high school level. You know, I know we talked about having somebody specifically there for the athletes in college, but high school as well. Because when that happens, they can veer off and go many different ways. They can go into drugs. They can go into depression and things like that. And I think, you know, us and other people out there, that should be our responsibility to try and combat that, you know, as best we can.
Yeah,
I really think that I think that it's a systemic, collaborative matter. In that, you know, we talked, I believe it was on the first show, about the impact that society has and the pressure that society puts on student athletes and on professional athletes. And I think that this shift, whether, you know, you're going to junior college or you do go D1 or D2 or D3 or whatever is the best possible option for the student, I think that it really does come down to making a well-informed decision and being open and receptive to the goodness, if you will. This is the empowerment and the inspiration part of me, guys. Being open and receptive to not blocking some goodness that can come to you because you have this focus on one thing. I'm not suggesting for a moment that you not be focused, but what I am saying is that you have to be open. You have to approach your athletic career with an open mind and an open heart. And I know that everybody that's listening to our show may not be people of faith, so I'm not going to put it in a spiritual context. I'm just going to put it in a universal context and say it this way. When we are unwilling to let go of what's in our hand, i.e., the focus on D1, 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 even though it might not be a realistic goal, we then make it impossible for ourselves to receive the other possibilities that could be available to us. And I hope that that makes sense, because we see it so often. And when I think about particularly where HBCUs are concerned, and one of the underlying reasons why I wanted us to start doing House Talk pregame is because I think the D2 schools and the D3 schools, particularly within the context of HBCUs, I don't think that they get fair consideration, and they should. Mm-hmm. When you look culturally at the experience that we have at HBCUs, when we look at all of the support and the warmth and the embrace that one can experience at an HBCU on and off the field, on and off the court, it's unmatched. It's unmatched. And it's not taking anything from a D1 school. I've been to a number of Division I games throughout my life. But I've also been to a number of D2 and D3 athletic events, and I will tell you, having worked at a D2 and a D3 HBCU, the cultural experience is bar none. Like it is, you can't touch it. You absolutely, positively cannot touch the cultural experience. And when we look at the times that we're living in, how important now more than ever before is our embrace of our culture more important than it's ever been. Folks, these conversations are so important. And we know that these conversations are going on in your house, in your car, you know, in your mind. You're peeling back the layers of these discussions, and we want you to join these conversations. You can always reach us live during the show at 515-605-9744, or you can email us ahead of the show at htpregame@gmail.com. We want you to get that Heritage Sports Radio Network app on your phone. And we also, you know, we know that times are hard and everybody might not be able to, but certainly for those who find value in what we're doing and what we're setting out to get accomplished in our communities on and off the campus, we could use your support to keep these conversations going. So you can, you know, help us by your sponsorship with a gift in whatever amount you can afford by visiting drlaurendpitts.com, and you can click on the donate button, or you can email us at htpregame@gmail.com to receive a sponsorship packet. But the emphasis, folks, is on your contribution to these conversations. We want to know what you're thinking. We want to know what you're feeling. We want your questions so collaboratively we can work through these systemic issues together. Jared?
Yes, definitely. Again, you always hit it right on the head. So
yes,
we
sir.
all talked about, you know, the last chance you navigating junior college, not going D1, and if you don't go D1, is that the last chance for you? You know, not only for football but also for life. I also want to go back, and there was something else I wanted to mention about junior college, because yes, everything has its ups, everything has its downs, and we're here to give you the truth, as we said earlier, and be transparent. And one thing I want to say about junior college, it's a lot that goes on in junior college, a lot of stuff that goes on that unfortunately, you know, it happens, and I wish it didn't. But one thing I'll say that I think really helped me going to a junior college, and not to say that I didn't have this type of mentality before, but it really was a dog-eat-dog world, and that can go one way for the athlete or it can go a total opposite. And I think that for our young listeners out there, if you do end up going the junior college route, you really have to hone in mentally and really have a extreme amount of focus to get through your 2 years, your 1.5 year, whatever it is, because when you get there, like Ronnie said, the coaches, they're there to coach you and move you forward. Like, they don't really care too much about your emotional, stability and your family background. So you have to go there and get what you want, and you have to go hard every single day. You have to focus. You have to cancel out distractions. Yes, some schools are in the middle of nowhere where you don't have many distractions, but my second junior college I went to was in the middle of downtown Brooklyn, right across the bridge from Manhattan. So you're in New York City. And I've seen guys get caught up in a lot of distractions there because they're away from school for the first time. You know, they're coming in the morning, missing practice, late to practice, and they get cut. So what you have to do is really find a group of teammates that are like-minded, and that's what helped me. I had I was in a room
That's
with
good.
3 other people. Yeah. The living arrangements can be very, very bad. You know, it was no meal plan there, so some guys weren't eating. So we had to come together, you know, as a collective group. Some guys veer off, some didn't, and I stuck with about 5 guys on a consistent basis, and 3 of them were my roommates. We would help each other mentally. We would talk about what our goals are. We would talk about what our dreams are. We would share, you know, personal stories about our lives. And it's kind of like in that room, it was kind of like a therapy session. You know, we didn't know it at the time, but as I look back on it, that was very, very helpful because every single one of those guys that I hung with, we all got scholarships, either Division I or Division II football. And one of them, you know, went on to play in the NFL. He's currently out of the NFL. But it just goes to show, yes, junior college has a lot of struggles, but the way you can combat it is if you surround yourself with the right people. And I'm pretty sure a lot of people, you know, may have heard this. My mother always says this: show me your 3 closest friends, and basically I can determine, you know, where your future will be headed. So you really have to surround yourself. Show me your 3 closest friends, and I'll be able to show you which way your future is headed. So you really have to surround yourself with the right people. Don't get caught up in the cool stuff. I mean, it was crazy. I mean, guys were smoking weed more than they was trying to go to practice in junior college. You know what I'm saying? So, and that's just the real. You know what I mean? And you have to really focus, because if you can overcome that, you'll go to university. You'll be in a much better position, and then it's going to help you because you'll be more seasoned than that freshman who's all state coming into the school. They haven't experienced the roadblocks that you've experienced in junior college. You're more seasoned, you're experienced, so that's going to give you an advantage. So, yes, there are struggles. There are some downs to junior college, but like anything, there's always a positive in it. But it's up to you as an individual to find it. And that's what I'll say about junior college. It can be a great thing for you, and it can also hurt you if you don't go in with the right mindset.
Yes, sir.
So as we're winding up, we've got about 7-8 minutes left. So it sounds like from what each of you have said and how we've peeled back the layers on this discussion, just another extraordinarily robust discussion in my personal and professional opinion. It really sounds like there has to be this emphasis on being deliberate and intentional at the high school level as it relates to discipline and focus and resolve of one's emotional baggage that could present itself in the form of mental illness and all of these contributing factors that, if these matters are not appropriately addressed and supported at the high school level, junior college, in fact, could be the last chance for an athletic career at the D1 level, at the D2 level, or even one's chance of making it to the pros. So in the next, let's say the next 5 minutes, let's talk about that. Let's discuss. You all have been there, done that. You each have extraordinary careers now, but it didn't come without blood, sweat, tears, and a whole lot of pain. Share with our listeners some key points that you feel like they could benefit from to sort of get their act together at the high school level and get themselves on track to have a stellar athletic career at any collegiate level, whether they go pro or not.
Ronnie wants to take that?
Yeah, sure. So probably one of the biggest tips, and, we harp on this a lot, is having a support system. And, like we've been saying throughout the entire episode, oftentimes, me and Jared both know this, a lot of our teammates weren't afforded a support system at a very early age, even through high school. So when I say support system, I'm not necessarily always talking about a family member or somebody like that.
Mm-hmm.
It can be the parent of a friend that you trust, or a trusted adult in the school building, or one of your coaches, somebody that you can rely on and talk to and process things, somebody who, an adult who's going to give you that right information and be a mentor to you. Second thing, and we talk about, going D1 and things like that. And if that doesn't happen, even if you don't go D1, making that choice to go to a college is a life-altering decision. That's going to change. That's going to frame and build the foundation for your early adulthood years and going forward. So, making a sound decision and not doing something outside of what you want to do, following your heart. You'll typically hear players say, I chose this school because it felt like home, or I chose this school because, it made me feel comfortable and things like that. That's big. When you make that decision and you sign that national letter of intent, you're basically, you're committing yourself and your life and your development to that school. So, making that sound decision and not rushing into a decision. D1 athletes, they have to make a decision. They can make it as early as December now, but typically the first Wednesday in February is when they make that decision. D2 and D3, you can wait a little bit longer. And if you have to wait, because oftentimes when you wait and make a sound decision, you'll end up making the best decision possible for you. Those are probably my two biggest tips: is support system and making sound decisions for your career and your student athletic career as well.
Nice.
Right.
Jared, you want to add anything?
I'll add it in before we, end the show. But the first thing I'll say, and it's a quote from a book by Napoleon Hill, every adversity brings with it the seed of an equivalent advantage.
Yes.
So with that being said, a lot of guys, females, whatever, you may feel that you're coming up upon adversity or failure because you don't reach the Division I level. But if you can live by that quote, every adversity brings with it the seed of an equivalent advantage. That tells you that in the midst of that adversity, that failure, that perceived failure, there's an advantage that's waiting for you on the other side. But to get to that advantage on the other side, you have to change your mindset. You have to have an open mind. And I think that's the key, one of the key things that, we talked about that you guys should take away from this show. Having that ability to deal with failure, because you're going to fail, but it can bring so much greater out of you. And then another thing, just to put the reality into this, there's nearly 8 million students that currently participate in high school athletics in the United States. And then about 480,000, only 480,000 from 8 million compete as NCAA athletes. So yes, you're going to feel that you didn't make the small percentage to go Division I, but you are in still a very, very small percentage that is playing on the college level and has a scholarship. So that in itself should be celebrated. You should give yourself a pat on the back, because there's not many kids that can say that they have a scholarship to go play football and do something they love, get an education, get exposed to different cultures, have, the opportunity to gain knowledge on a whole different level, and be able to, if gone about the right way in college, you can go into the world post-athletics and have, so much potential and so many things to look forward to than if you didn't attend college at all. So you're already putting yourself ahead of your peers, and that's one of the greatest things. When I reflect on my experiences, I had the opportunity to go to school for free, play football. I met people. I grew as a person as well, and you can't take that back. You can never get that back.
Nice. Well, look, gentlemen, it's that time. Wow, wow, wow. What a phenomenal, phenomenal show we had today. Look, listeners, we want you to tune in next week to House Talk Pregame with Dr. Lauren Pitts. We've got a powerful show for you next week. We're going to be talking about proving ourselves, and we're going to get into substance use and abuse. Until next week, I'm your empowerment coach and inspirational speaker, Dr. Lauren Pitts. Have a great remainder of your weekend, folks.